Great. I think we have a lot of people coming in, and this should be the right time for us to kick off the webinar today. Thank you everyone for joining in. Good evening to folks. Guys, we have come together today for the third edition of the webinar series under the name Blue Smart EV Unplugged. I'm very happy to introduce you to our esteemed panel today, which is of Anmol and Sophia. My name is Tushar Garg. I'm part of the founding team at Blue Smart. I'm the Chief Business Officer of Blue Smart. Anmol Jaggi, guys, for you is the founder and CEO of Blue Smart. Anmol is the brainchild behind Blue Smart Mobility, which runs an all-electric ride-hailing service on the streets of Delhi NCR and very soon in other parts of the country and hopefully in the world as well. Anmol, folks, is a clean tech entrepreneur has been a clean tech entrepreneur all through his life. He started out his journey in the renewable energy sector, has built multiple businesses. One of his businesses was bootstrapped to the public markets, doing extremely well. Anmol's always been close to the clean green sector, and I think from there is where Blue Smart and the EV evolution using which has evolved for himself. I'm very happy to today have Anmol on the panel with us to share a lot more on the topic that we have. At the same time, guys, we also have Miss Sophia Nadur with us on the call. Sophia comes from British Petroleum, the organization. She is the managing partner of BP Ventures. That's the venture arm of BP. Sophia leads the venture deals for BP across upcoming new markets. Very happy to also inform and let you know that Sophia led the deal for Blue Smart Series A back in September 2021. We're extremely proud to have a partner like BP Ventures backing us and having a very, very able board member in Sophia who's guiding us from ever since they stepped into our lives. And we believe our journey today is shaping up well on the back of having the best partners possible for building an all-electric ride-hailing and an EV charging business that we as Blue Smart have been doing. Guys, today's topic is, can India save $18 billion of trade deficit by adopting EVs? Now that sounds big, that's a huge number that we are talking about, but there is some very interesting insights that we are here to share with you, which I would request Anmol and Sophia for us to share with. I will be moderating the session. I'll probably pose questions to both of them to help guide the session and get the right insights out of them. Trade deficit, guys, as you would know, is essentially the difference between the amount of imports you as a country do against the exports that you do. And that's where trade deficits for you as geographies, as countries kind of erupt, right? Today, we are discussing the increasing gap of exports and imports in the country, which is India for us, and how it is correlated with hike in the crude oil prices, which I'm sure all of you must have been hearing and learning over the past few quarters in our lives. And our dependence on fuel imports, right? We have all heard what's been happening, how this transition of the fuel crude prices going up is kind of, if I may say, hurting us. And today we are here to discuss and understand if that trade deficit, if that hurt can be reduced, if there is more adoption of electric vehicles. During this session, guys, what we expect is we will then see how the transport sector is the largest consumer of petrol and diesel and how impactful a fossil fuel free world, imagine it as one which is running 100% of electric vehicles in the transport sector would look like. Would it be saving billions of dollars and also saving the environment at the same time? So can that actually happen? We will also unfold the expensive battery import myth surrounding the EVs, right? And how they perform and with respect to the ICE engine counterparts when it comes to the overall import over the life of the vehicle. That's a very interesting thought, guys, and when we come to it is something that I hope you'll be left surprised on what essentially happens when you compare EV battery imports with the fossil fuel import, crude oil import that you as a country called India does. I hope through this webinar we will try to find an answer to how adopting even, let's say, about just a million EVs, right? Which, guys, is about just 1/3 of all the vehicles that was sold in our country over the last year. So just even if we adopt about 1 million EVs on the streets of our country, can that act as a cure for both our dependence on oil and reducing the trade deficit of the country, which is currently running in billions of dollars, and ultimately moving to a 100% fuel emission free EV nation, which I believe will be a dream come true for all of us. So folks, with that introduction, and while it may sound like a bit off topic, but Sophia, I would like to bring you in at this point in time. And since you represent a very big organization, that's British Petroleum, which also interestingly has signed up for a net zero by 2050. How are you seeing that movement happening? What's happening on that agenda? How are you seeing that net zero wish for BP by 2050 shaping up?
So hi everyone, and thanks Tushar, thanks Anmol for having me on. So so BP and Castrol, so we have two companies which have had over 100 years presence in India. But like everywhere else, we are absolutely cognizant that the world needs to get to net zero. And to do that, big organizations like BP need to get to net zero as well. And so we started on this drive in February 2020, literally weeks before we locked down in many parts of the world. We laid out our net zero ambitions to become net zero as a company, and also to help the world get to net zero. And that's not we're not trying to be cocky about it, but actually you need big organizations as well to help ensure that net zero, let's say, objective can be achieved and can be done in a sustainable way. Because at the end of the day, as we see now with all of the challenges facing the fuel prices, etc., people are asking for affordable and convenient energy, but also cleaner energy. And people want that, but it's how do you deliver that sort of pyramid of clean, affordable, and also convenient energy? And so that's a pathway that we're on, and we're trying to work that through. But we've had huge amounts of success. I mean, we've launched just in the EV space. It's been one of our key growth engines, and I've been a big supporter of this within BP, even when it was still a side hustle within the company. I mean, we've launched big positions in the UK where it comes to EV charging, in Germany, in China, in the US. And actually what we started last year, bigger BP, we partnered with Reliance to set up a mobility joint venture called GeoBP. And that's helping us to make sure that both we can get battery swapping and EV charging, scale those up very quickly as we can in India. And then my role as the sort of ventures lead for BP is to help with scaling up some of the brilliant companies that are working in clean tech and clean energy, because it's not just the big companies that are going to do it. You're going to need to have collaborations with smaller companies. So joint ventures and collaborations with big companies, but also with smaller companies as well, which are fast scaling, and I think have very good product market fit and with respect to what we need here in India as well. So, I mean, short answer is great progress has been made, but there's so much more we can do, but we can only do this together with companies like Blue Smart.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Sophia. And Sophia, just for while I might know this to some extent because of our engagement over the past year or so, but just for the advantage of our audience out here as well, while I do understand coming from BP, this is a professional life, this is a job that you do, but I also know this almost for a fact that you personally are also a very big advocate of environment, going net zero, being sustainable, right? So if I may ask, right, as if this is the right way to put it, which is, while yes, companies have a responsibility to do this, but I believe as individuals, as people also, this is a job that each one of us should be doing. So if I may pose a question to you, which is, how have you as Sophia or as your family been contributing towards this sustainability cause, right? If you could just share some thoughts on that, maybe some cues for people to take up from for their own individual personal lives.
I think it's a good question. I think we all as individuals, whatever we do in our day jobs, we have to live and breathe it in our lives. And that's the only way that actually we will be able to encourage and be advocates for the entire ecosystem to shift. 5 years ago, we swapped from a 2-car household to a 1-car household. And then literally 6 months later, we moved to an EV. So in our house, we only have 1 car and it's an EV. And for every other journey, we're taking clean options, and we made that decision as a family. As well, we also have home charging, which we're fortunate to have, but also we also try to cut down on waste and moving more and more to a vegetarian lifestyle, which may seem quite normal in India, but in the so-called Western world, it's not. It takes. You have to think about it, and you have to actively take steps to change it. So I think there are things we can do, not just around EVs, but generally to try and have a lighter footprint.
Yes. No, amazing, Sophia. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. I think I personally get very, very excited listening to you. There is so much to learn. There's so much to become a better person from, and I hope that's useful for everyone on this webinar today. Let me change courses and come back to why all of us have come together today for this webinar on the topic of how can India save about $18 billion of trade deficit by adopting EVs. So Anmol, switching over to you, right? I think the first thing I would love for you to share with the audience is around, with the global headwinds aiming towards recession, how does the current trade situation look for India? Let's maybe start at that macro level and then slowly and steadily step into the trade deficits and EV, the story around EVs around that.
Thanks.
So how does the current trade deficit or the situation look for India in the current, in the light of the recession that the world is seemingly moving towards?
So it's actually, Tushar, starting on a very grim note, year on year, our trade deficit has doubled. So if you look at the trade deficit for the month of June last 2021, and if you look at the trade deficit for the month of June 2022, it is doubled, which is actually resulting in our currency becoming actually for the first time in the history breaching the dollar to rupee as 80. So it's a very serious concern for the country. We have to also analyze what is the reason number one of getting us here. Last June, the crude prices were about $60–70. This June, the crude prices are $100+, which basically means that to import the same quantity of fuel, we almost had to spend 60–70% more amount of forex. The amount of forex that is going out is resulting in a lot of currency depreciation, which, as we know, is not good for the health of any economy. So I would say that, and in the light of recession, actually, it paints the picture even more grimmer. So the whole idea is, and which is also the theme of our webinar, is that how do we get this large crude oil bucket, which is about 20% of all the imports that the country, as a country, that we do, how can we reduce it using EVs, and how can we actually make India as a more sustainable economy, not just sustainable on environment, but also sustainable as an economy by reducing the dependence on crude oil. We all know that India does not have, God has not bestowed us with the best of the oil reserves. So we will always be dependent on import of oil from foreign countries. But that does not mean that there are no ways and means of actually reducing this trade deficit. There is more than enough traction that electric mobility is now getting in the country. And with that traction, we believe that there is a real chance that if concerted efforts are made by all of us, users, consumers, companies, OEMs, distribution companies for electricity, the government, we will see that we can actually take it up as a mission to bridge this trade deficit, which will help us a lot. We have seen that in our neighborhood very recently, Sri Lanka as a country has gone absolutely bust. Right. This is 100% related to the trade deficit, balance of trade that the country had, and they ran out of forex. Yes. Although India is very far from that, we still sit on about $500 billion of reserves. But we have to also be cautious of the fact that it is less than 11 months of our import coverage. So the situation is grim. We need to take real concerted action to bring the trade deficit in order, while everybody will pray that crude oil prices come down. But given how geopolitical scenario across the world is looking, as it really doesn't look like that we are going to see a $60, $70, $80 kind of a crude oil price coming soon. And if this continuously persists for another 18 to 24 months, we will see that India, which is losing foreign exchange at the rate of $5 billion a year, will actually be in a slightly tricky situation going forward. So, to summarize, there is effort which is needed to reduce the trade deficit. Crude oil is the single largest import item. EVs can replace crude oil to a big extent, and hence all of us need to take action for it.
Definitely, Anmol. Thank you so much for sharing that. But sounds like a grim situation, but looks like there is a solution in the name of EV. So let me then ask you this: what will the scenario look like for India if, let's say, all the vehicles are converted to EVs?
So, first of all, I'll be the most happy person if all the vehicles convert to EV. I think the smile will be even larger. So that's for sure. And I hope when all vehicles convert to EV, most of them are blue. That will make the smile even more larger. So happy with that. But the whole idea is that the EVs are not just great from a trade deficit perspective, but also have a lot of other concerning impacts around pollution. They have other concerning impacts around new manufacturing setups being created, etc. The whole new supply chain around EV getting set up. So, but just coming on the focus topic of trade deficit, we have what we have written in our white paper, and Tushar, we should also thank the team which has written the white paper, because they put in a lot of effort to kind of get all these numbers and put all these numbers. The headline summary of our white paper actually says that India gets to save about close to $3.5 billion a month in Forex if all the vehicles on the road are turned EVs. And we have not taken, so crude oil is used for many usages, many purposes. It is used to create plastics. It is used in aviation fuel. It is used as feedstock for a lot of industries. So while doing this white paper, we were very cognizant of what is the various usage patterns of crude oil. So if $100 of crude, if one crude barrel, which is at $100, gets imported into the country, where all it is used. And we found out that approximately 17% of that is used in the transportation sector, which is what EVs can actually replace. Then in the transportation sector, we further divided the sector to say that aviation cannot be made electric, at least in the short term. There are some trains which cannot be made electric in the short term. So all of that cannot be made electric soon. So we focused the number crunching only to the numbers of cars, two-wheelers, three-wheelers, four-wheelers, and buses. And we went through a lot of statistics which the government of India had presented in its various reports to look at what is the petroleum, gasoline, diesel consumption or CNG consumption in some of these form factors of mobility. And based on that, we did a simulation, and that simulation is on the screen, which basically says of what could have been the amount of money that we would have saved. And very interesting trend, Tushar, which the graph in front of you points out is, you look at April 21 to June 22, the trade deficit is gone from $3 billion approximately to $7 billion.
Right.
And 100% of the increase, 100% of the increase has happened only because of the increase in crude oil.
Correct.
Increase in crude oil prices.
Yeah.
Out of the $7.5 billion kind of dollars of trade deficit that the country is doing today, we believe that $3.8 billion can be replaced when crude oil or petroleum products which are being used for ground transport, which is basically 2 wheels, 3 wheels, 4 wheels, buses, we can save about $3.8 billion of this. And I think we were very lucky that we were able to get this data from the Petroleum Ministry. We are very lucky that we were able to get a lot of data from Ministry of Commerce, which publishes the data around import and export of every item and the price at which it is being imported. So based on this, and a lot of and we did not want to actually release this white paper when the crude oil was, had just touched $100 or $110, because then it would have looked like that this is not a persistent thing and maybe it's only a fry in the pan and it's a temporary effect. But now that the crude is hovering above the $100 mark now for the last 4 months plus, and the geopolitical situation is not looking such that we are actually going to see this coming down. In fact, you will see that you would have heard last week, the US President Joe Biden was at Saudi Arabia to request for more pumping of crude oil. And what Saudi Arabia said, that they are already pumping out the max crude oil, which can be pumped out. So in that scenario where more crude oil cannot be pumped out, Russia is out of the situation. Countries are actually resorting to some of the things that they had never imagined. Germany is now at the verge of starting nuclear power plants. Japan, as we hear, has already ordered the restart of 9 nuclear power plants, which is basically that some very long-term policy measures that these countries had taken, as Germany and Japan, to go out of nuclear is now coming back because the crude oil import is pinching them so hard that they cannot actually, in Europe, as you know, Europe, if you look at the currency of Europe, which is euro and dollar have come to parity. And again, and I would like to get Sophia ma'am's kind of comment on this, is that the euro and dollar parity is all concerning the trade deficit. Europe is in 2 decades gone into a trade deficit. And I don't know the numbers as much as what I know for India, but we'd like to hear Sophia ma'am. Is all courtesy the high import gas price which is there and high import of crude oil. But ma'am, over to you for some thoughts on how we see, because it's not just that the Indian currency has gone to 80 rupees, it's also that euro and dollar have come at parity.
Yes, please, Sophia, if you could shed some light on what's your understanding of what's happening in the European continent, and how does this relate maybe to some extent with what we see out here in India?
Okay, first of all, I don't hold myself out to be an economist. My job, my role is to find brilliant companies to scale. But obviously as a consumer, as we all are, we're feeling the pinch in different ways. I think it's a conflation of many things that have put us where we are today. One, during COVID, especially in the Western countries, and this is my personal opinion. During COVID, we were printing money in a lot of countries. So I remember going to the ATM sometimes during COVID, and I always kept getting fresh, crisp notes. And I kept thinking, well, who's printing this? Why are we printing so much? So I think we are now suffering from that sort of largesse where the governments were trying to make sure that people, and it was a good reason too, a lot of people were unemployed. How do you keep food on the table? How do you keep roofs over heads? I mean, that was an important part of getting people through a pandemic, which was unprecedented. But now we've come to the other side. And now the challenge is that the world has to move to a place where renewable energy is making up a much bigger share of the energy, the input energy, but that's taking time. Yeah, and it's no magic. There's no magic bullet. Nuclear has a role to play, but I personally think solar and renewable energy and gas to an extent and other types of fuel sources where there's a much lighter footprint, and as traditional fuels, they will help in the transition to ensure that we can get to let's say net zero 2050, 2070, whatever that number is, but as quickly as possible. But I mean, the challenge is that India, as you mentioned, Anmol, doesn't produce its own oil as such. And so it will always be a big part. And of course, but you're a growing economy. People want products and services just like everywhere else in the world. How do you provide those as efficiently and as clean and as convenient as possible? So I think you're going to still see this high dependency for some time, but I can tell you there are many people who are trying to do as much as possible to try and move that curve, bring that curve back down in a way that's more reasonable and more sustainable. And I don't think for one second that the inventiveness in India can't help find solutions. It doesn't have to come from abroad. It comes from within India as well.
So thank you, Sophia ma'am. But Tushar, just to summarize the slide and to say that thanks to all the statistics and data that we could pick up from Ministry of Petroleum, Ministry of Commerce, we believe that the trade deficit, which has gone from $3 billion in the month of April to $7+ billion in the month of June, is largely attributable to the price increase. India is sitting at $500 billion of cash of forex reserves as we speak, and we are currently dwindling at the rate of $7 billion a month. So that's the hard fact of today. And EVs, like we mentioned, when we did our modeling with the statistics provided by various ministries, when we did the modeling of the numbers, we were able to reach a number that at about $100 of crude price, India would be able to save out of this $7.5 billion of trade deficit, about $3.8 billion will get saved if we are able to replace 100% of crude oil ground transport with EVs. It's not going to happen. It's just a projection. But this webinar's initiative, or the intent of the webinar is to prod a lot of our listeners and is to prod the larger community to say that EV adoption is not just good for environment, but is also good for the health of the economy. I think one statement, if we would want to, if we would like our listeners to take home, is that EVs are good for environment and EVs are good for the economy. That's what I would want to summarize this particular slide in.
Fair. Thank you so much, Anmol. Having said that, Anmol, let me try to be the devil's advocate here at this point in time, right? Yes, sounds like EV replacing the ICE engine vehicles with EV will help the cause of the economy, but isn't the battery of these EVs also being imported? So isn't this just replacing your source of the problem with a different source out there? So do you think EV adoption will also increase the import bill because batteries are imported?
Yeah, good question. And Tushar, and if you would see out of the 15, 17, 18 questions that we have on the chat box, about 4-5 questions are related to import of cells and batteries that we would do. And will it actually, so while we were doing our research, and thanks for pointing it out, and thanks for a lot of our audience to kind of point it out that we are going to import. India is also an importer of lithium ion, and hence we would see that there is going to be an import for manufacturing of EVs. We're going to import these lithium ion cells and batteries. Now, having said that, we would start also the EV supply chain in the country, which will reduce our dependence on imports. But lithium as a commodity will still need to be imported, because again, God has not been kind on us when it comes to lithium. So God has been very kind with, like what Sophia ma'am said, Indians are very inventive. So maybe God has been kind with brains, but God has not been kind with a lot of resources around crude oil, lithium, etc., for us. But that was a very important part of this white paper, and we studied, and we said that we took the example of BLU-smart, because BLU-smart is having its own captive fleet, and we know the amount of kilometers that we are running, etc. So we analyzed that in BLU-smart, if there was one car which is running about close to 200 kilometers a day for 30 days in a month, the amount of fuel, liquid fuel, which is diesel, that we would have imported as a result of we being on, let's say if BLU-smart was all ICE, we would have each, and assuming the price would have been at $100, it would have led to a total import of about close to 4,300, 4,290 is the precise number. Per car, we would have had to import crude oil versus of $4,290, let's say $4,300. And this would have happened for every year for the life of the car. Whereas what is very important to understand is that the EV battery import that is happening is to happen only just once. Once the battery has been imported, it runs for 5 years without recycling. India has already a lot of lithium which has been imported into the country by ways and means of battery packs for our laptops, for our phones, for other usage scenarios which are there. And today we also know that in the country, there are many startups and many large companies which are focusing on what is being called as urban mining. There is, if we look at just our desk or our home, you will find 10, 15, 20 devices, phones, laptops, other gadgets, which already have lithium in them, which at their end of life should actually get recycled. It is just that the reverse supply chain of getting all this back into the recycling is not yet done, and which, like we know in the industry, a lot of startups have started to do the work around urban mining also. When urban mining actually starts, it is to India's advantage that the import of EV, there is so much of lithium which is already there in the country that actually the import of lithium will not even be required. So on one hand, because crude oil, once it is used, gets converted into carbon dioxide and goes into the atmosphere, which is a negative thing for the atmosphere.
Yeah.
Lithium, which is sitting in the gadgets or the cards that we have, is actually sitting there. And if we can create robust reverse supply chains of carrying the lithium back from consumers to factories, we will be able to urban mine a lot of this and actually ensure a circular economy kicks in. When the circular economy kicks in, whenever 2, 3, 4 years later, we will actually see that this import that we are projecting of per car at about $2,800 will also not be required. But today, the ground situation is that the reverse supply chains are not yet created. So urban mining is a very small fraction of all the lithium which is being used in the country. So we are still importing. But at the average of price of $132 a kilowatt hour, which is the average import price of lithium ion batteries that we saw in the last 1 year. Again, this data is from Ministry of Commerce, and this is not a BLU-smart data. What we saw was that at that price, in an EV Tigor car, which is the workhorse of BLU-smart, we will, for a 21.5 kilowatt hour battery, which is also the standard battery size that our EV Tigor cars have, it works out to $2,838. As you can see, that over the 5-year, which is the lifetime of the car, on ICE vehicle, you are importing crude worth $21,450, whereas one-time import of importing the battery is $2,838, which basically means that there is a 1:9 kind of a ratio on the Forex exchange saving that you do when you import batteries for an EV or when you import crude oil for an ICE vehicle. And to say what kind of an extent are we talking about? If just 1 million EVs, and 1 million EVs is nothing, India today has close to approximately 30 million cars which are plying on the road, 1 million buses which are plying on the road, close to 200 million two-wheelers which are plying on the road. When 1 million EVs convert, when 1 million of these four wheels actually convert to EVs out of the 30 million which are plying on the road, you will see that India as a nation would have saved $18.5 billion in foreign exchange, which is extremely great, which is what we should all aim for. So the question is very pertinent when you ask that, will it mean that because we are not importing crude, now we are importing lithium?
Right.
Is it just a trade-off, or is it actually saving? And as you can see from the slide and the numbers that our team has worked out, is that the difference of import of lithium and the import of crude oil is in the ratio of 1:9. It is, if it would have been 1:1.5, 1:2, maybe we would have said that it's a edge case. Depending on crude, let's say, crude falls to $60, what will happen? But even if, let's say, we were to take a scenario that crude prices come down to $60, then also you would see that the import from $21,000 would have gone to $14,000 or something like that, vis-a-vis again $2,800, which is there. So the margin of kind of import of crude oil versus the margin on the import of EV so large that I think crude oil will have to become $10 for it to become kind of come on parity. Which I don't know when it comes like, and I would actually never wish that crude oil actually comes to $10. It is a commodity, and there is a cost of extracting it, and there is a lot of man-machine effort which is being put into extract, and everybody should make a fair money out of it. But even when crude oil kind of drops to $10, is when over the 5-year life of the car is, you will see that the import of lithium matches the import of crude oil. But the positive impact and when Tushar, maybe when we do this webinar again in 2 years, we would have seen 1 million cars convert to EV and $18 billion being saved. We will do another study to say how much of that $2,838 is now coming from urban mining. because I'm sure in 2-3 years, and there is a lot of traction which is there on urban mining, which is picking up in the country. And with that, you will see that all the batteries in our cell phones, all the batteries in our laptops, gadgets, cars getting recycled, which would basically mean that the import will actually half from where we are, which would make the numbers go even more larger in favor of EV packs than they would go into ICE vehicles. So to summarize the slide, more than enough, 9 times is the factor of crude oil being imported versus battery imports, which means that we should focus more and more on EV adoption. Urban mining will further reduce the lithium imports that we do, and India gets to save if 1 million cars, which is 10 lakh cars, convert to EVs. We save over the lifetime of those cars about $18.5 billion, which is an extremely large number for we as a nation.
Perfect. Amazing. Anmol, thank you so much for explaining it in such fine detail. I believe that's going to be extremely useful for all the people hearing, and that just helps to bring perspective to how EVs actually make sense, as we've always been saying, not just for the environment, but for the economy as well. But at this point in time, I would like to bring Sophia in as well. We definitely gave this example, and Anmol shared with us how for a four-wheeler, a regular electric vehicle, or its ICE engine equivalent, how does that comparison look like? But Sophia, we also do believe that there are other form factors or product form factors out there, electrification of which can help the cause. So do you think, and I'm asking you, Sophia, this question because I know there is a lot of interest that you carry in other form factors and electrification of the same. So do you, Sophia, believe that electrification of the last mile logistics products can add to this mix? And will that make a huge difference for India?
I think all of us on this call advocates or people working in industry. So the question is always, what can I do? What can I do to help remove this burden? And I'll give an example. So in the last mile and logistics space in India, that accounts to about 14% of India's GDP, just logistics costs alone. And actually 14% of India's GDP, that's actually twice the number in terms of a percentage term as in the US and China. What is that telling us? It's quite an inefficient logistics systems we've got in place right now in India. We've got to fix that. Electrifying that will obviously remove carbon emissions. There's talk around 10 gigatons of carbon emissions being removed by 2030 just by implementing some electric mobility options in last mile. Why is that important? Because you've got 100 million shoppers right now in India. You're going to get 350 million shoppers shopping online by 2025. 17 million deliveries are made every day of food, grocery, pharmacy, and other items. That will increase to about 45 million by mid-century. And actually, if you think of it, about 40% of shipment volume in the last mile space goes to about the top 500 to 700 pins in India. So yes, we have to do a lot, but there's a lot that we can do to be able to shift that needle, get carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, and also create demand for EVs. Because it's not just about saying, oh, we can bring EVs and I will reduce our fuel bill long term, but actually we need to make sure there's enough demand pull. Again, that's part of the reason why BP invested in BLU-smart, because they were a perfect example in the four-wheel space for demand pull. So, and there's something I think for the broader audience to think about. In the last mile space, there's huge opportunity there as well to both reduce our import bill and also improve the efficiency within the GDP numbers in India. I mean, Amazon, for instance, they're planning to have 10,000 EVs delivering parcels by 2025. Swiggy is talking about a commitment to covering 800,000 kilometers a day using EVs by 2025. DHL is targeting 100% of the EV delivery fleet to be EVs by 2023. I mean, these are numbers that they have committed for India. I mean, even Big Basket saying that they're pledging to meet 90% of the EV target within 3 years. There's huge ESG commitments by a lot of these last mile companies, and that in itself presents a big opportunity for electrifying the last mile in logistics. So when you think of all of us who are sitting in e-mobility as advocates and as practitioners, what can we do to be able to don't just think of these headline numbers, but think, what can we do? Well, look around in terms of some of the areas that are, I would say, easy to electrify, relatively speaking, and they can have a huge impact. And so, like I said, I mean, and I know there's a big push now to electrify intracity. I mean, that for me will really move the needle. And if we look at that, not just obviously the four-wheel ride-hail, ride-sharing models, which I'm a huge advocate. I mean, obviously I am because of the Blue Smart involvement, but I think there's a lot we can do as well in the last mile space.
Thank you so much, Sophia, for sharing that. And actually, on that note, guys, while all of this is very exciting, very impressive, but it also is a huge challenge, right? So going forward, Anmol, Sophia, both of you, question for both of you, what will be the key suggestions from your side to all the stakeholders for a swifter shift to EVs? How does the world move on that path?
Sophia, you would like to take that first? I should.
Well, I think, okay, like I said, and I'm not saying this to patronize at all. There's enough ambition, there's enough intellect, there's enough understanding that frugal innovation is what's going to deliver this for us in India. I think my sense is that we need to collaborate more. Because obviously we're all wanting to build unicorns and sunicorns and minicorns or whatever we want to do, but actually, and we can get there, many of us, but we can get there faster and more efficiently if we think about collaborating more and think of it around the EV value chain. Which bit of the EV value chain can your business, can you support with venture investment, with scale up money? What is it along that EV value chain? But think use case and think end user. And I think that's sometimes we don't really think. We sometimes very much in love with the technology, but I always believe technology is an enabler. Yeah, it's what is that sort of end game that you're trying to delight consumers and customers and let corporate customers hit their ESG targets. And that's where you then look along the value chain as to what we can do as industry players to help make that happen, and helping that happen in a way that is more collaborative than I think we are today.
Sure. Anmol, your thoughts, please.
Yeah. No, I think first of all, I would want to make a request to all the listeners on the call that adoption of EVs is the first thing that we should all start focusing on. I think there was a lot of anxiety around, will EVs be actually good for us as a consumer, as a user? Will we be able to get range? Will we get enough chargers? And I think at least in some of the areas where Blue is operating, I think we've gone ahead and more than proven out that EVs at scale can function, is a reliable form factor for mobility. If EVs can run in a ride-hail business, I can assure you that they can surely run as on personal mobility. I have personally, over the last 2 years, sold all my ICE cars and bought and have only a fleet of EV cars now. And I have seen that in personal mobility, cars actually rarely have to charge once in 4 days is once actually my home car doesn't charge, needs to get charged more than that, because we are not running like Blue Smart 200 kilometers a day. The personal car is running 50, 60, 70 kilometers a day only. So I would first urge out of all the stakeholders, which is users, to say that let's plan for adoption of EVs. Adoption of EVs is not just important from an economy perspective, is also a big thing for sustainability, for carbon dioxide emissions, and for the core city in which we operate, which is Delhi and NCR, is a big source of PM 2.5. Particulate matter is a big source of pollution which is here, and we would be able to get it down to zero. In fact, Sophia ma'am, you will be happy to know that as we speak, we are doing a lot of research on the health impacts of EV adoption and how countries can actually reduce their health budgets by adopting EVs. So not just that you save money on trade deficit, but you also save money on the health budget of the nation when you shift to EV. So that is going to be one of the themes for our next webinar around the fact that how health budgets can reduce with adoption of EVs. Other stakeholders, I think OEMs need to ramp up manufacturing of EVs. Distribution companies need to ensure that there are enough charging stations which get in. Financing companies need to ensure there is more financing which is available for offtake for buying of these cars. Every stakeholder has to play its part, and I think a lot of them are playing the part. The biggest of them has to come from users who have to adopt EVs. And for those who do not, and maybe this is a selfish kind of a statement that I would like to make, for those of you are not shifting to EVs very soon, use BLU-smart. I think we have a great service. This is advertorial, and we have a great service, and please do use us in the areas where we operate, which is Delhi NCR, and very soon in other cities. So please do use us and get a feel of what it is to travel in an EV car, and how it is sustainable, and how it is good for a drive experience also. So from stakeholders, I think our expectation is, I think we should just increase adoption. Tushar, also being mindful of time, I think let's just take a few questions.
I would love to do that as well. But Sophia and Anmol, thank you so much for addressing the audience on one, the trade deficit issue that we believe as BLU-smart and the larger community that EVs can help solve, and then also bringing in your perspective, especially Sophia, you bringing in your more global perspective, you bringing in your experience and understanding from the European side of the world, and then obviously you touching on many more geographies across the world. It always helps to hear you out. So Anmol, Sophia, thank you so much for sharing your views on the topic today. Let's move to the question answers from the audience. We are about 15 minutes away from the time we had for this webinar, and there are a handful of questions. I'll probably try to choose and pick and try to merge questions wherever possible to make it as quick as possible. Let's take this question. If EV subsidies die, will the model be still sustainable? Anmol, maybe a question for you.
So today, actually, it's a very few subsidy that the EV is getting. There is only, at least in Delhi, NCR or Karnataka or Maharashtra, which are some of the large states in EV adoption. We see that there is only the FAME, Government of India FAME subsidy, which is there. The Government of India FAME subsidy in our aim, in the budget which has been allocated, which is 10,000 crores. 10,000 crores should last about a couple of more years and not more than that. So, and actually for any good sector, for any thriving sector to be dependent on subsidies is not the real way. You cannot create a business case if you're always dependent on subsidies. So I would surely say that we would be, as BLU-smart, we would be very happy when subsidies move out. We believe there are more important things that subsidies have to do, like welfare of the poor, than to be given for EV adoption. If subsidies move out, what it does is that at maximum, our car costs will go up by 5, 7, 8%. We clearly believe that even with the car cost being at higher by 5, 7, 8%, but the tailwinds around the price reduction of EVs, we have seen that over the last 5 years, the cost of lithium has dropped by about close to 50, 60%. Although there is a small headwind that we saw during the commodity upsurge, but that's also kind of getting normalized. So EV prices will continue to drop, and EV subsidies, in fact, will go, even if they go, will make no impact on the cost of delivering the car or the two-wheeler or the three-wheeler or the last mile vehicle. So hence, I would personally vouch for. I've been in the renewable space earlier, and I can tell you that when solar had subsidies, we were growing slower. When subsidies got withdrawn from the solar business, is when the solar business actually grew to a very large extent. So people, I would urge that subsidies don't make any difference to the economics in the short term of it. Today, you might save 7-8%, but in the long term, any business to thrive has to be dependent on its own self and not be dependent on subsidies to make a business case. But happy to hear Sophia ma'am's thoughts on this.
I'll just make a quick comment. Thanks, Amal. I said, I mean, even today for three-wheelers, without subsidies, TCO is better than the ICE versions. So even already. So and my view is that for four-wheel, I think there may be a need still for a few subsidies, but probably in the commercial area. And this is not because it's BLU-smart or anything. I think it might be needed in commercial area, which would also incentivize people not to go and keep buying, not to go start buying EVs if they never owned a car before. So the idea is really and truly just to keep congestion levels down. We know private car ownership is quite low relative to other countries in the world, but assuming that your public and your semi-private, private ride-sharing, ride-hailing offers are available. I think you should make sure that at least there's a little bit of support to ensure that these commercial offers can thrive. And I'm talking buses, I'm talking all different types, multi-occupancy shuttles. But I see somebody ask a question around that. I'm a big supporter of multi-occupancy shuttles, which would fit between the 9 meters and the 12-meter buses as well. But anyway, I think subsidies have a role to play, but I think even without subsidies, sectors like three-wheelers is already TCO positive.
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much, Anmol and Sophia. Anmol, maybe a question for you, and I know this almost for a fact that we get to hear this a lot, right? The question around, yes, EVs are clean, but you use Indian electricity grid. That's about just 30% clean, 70% is still coal, high, all of that. So are there plans to go solar? Are there plans to make it 100% renewable? What's your take on that?
So I think a very BLU-smart centric question, which is around the fact that how do we go from zero tailpipe emissions to zero emissions? And I think at BLU, we are trying to take all possible steps to ensure that we go to zero emissions. As you are aware, Tushar, of course, and for a lot of our listeners and audience out here, BLU-smart is already starting a pilot project on converting one of the EV hubs to 100% renewable powered. I think about close to 20 days back, there was a Government of India legislation which brings in more ease in sourcing renewable energy power for electric mobility. And we are going to take benefit of that legislation. Early days, but we believe that before the end of the year, we could have a lot of our charging hubs actually go 100% renewable energy, and which I believe is going to be a very important milestone, because not just that we will have a zero tailpipe emissions company, but we will have a zero emissions company, and that can, the reality is around the corner. Is maybe it takes 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, but it's definitely in the short to medium term, you will see BLU-smart going to a very large extent on 100% renewable energy power. And we thank Government of India for the recent legislation that it brought in to actually help adopt renewable energy to electric mobility. And we are very, kind of fortunate that one of the thought process that we always had, which is to become zero emissions, will happen soon. We'll keep maybe one day, Tushar, once we have done a couple of our charging hubs as 100% renewable, we should do a case study and kind of release it for other people to kind of do knowledge sharing, and to say that how other charging station companies, etc., can also turn 100% renewable.
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much again, Anmol, for sharing that. I see a few of those questions on that line. So let's bring hydrogen into the mix. And Sophia, maybe a question for you, with your BP hat, and BP also maybe having reasons to look at hydrogen as a fuel. Is hydrogen the fuel of the future? Is EV a stopgap arrangement? How do you see the two coexist maybe?
So hydrogen as a fuel source will definitely be an option in what you call the hard to abate sectors. Some of the industrial clusters in Chennai and other parts of India, which will benefit from having hydrogen as part of the fuel mix there. That will hugely help. From a transport vehicle point of view, I think we're many years away from that. I think fuel cell vehicles are quite expensive. It's still in, I would say, prototype stage, not really commercially viable. And I think if you think of it, India is the 4th biggest auto OEM industry on the planet. Yeah. And so I don't necessarily think that we should just take some of the ideas that are from Japan or wherever else and say, oh, it's something we should adopt here. We need to think very carefully as to all the inputs that we've got. Yeah, and then what makes sense from a form factor and from a use case point of view. I think the heavy duty hydrogen fuel trucks are, I think, many years away, but we don't have time, and electrification is available in terms of electric vehicles. So I think we need to be much more pragmatic in India as to how we look at cleaning up transport.
Understood, definitely. Sorry, Anmol, any thoughts on that one?
Maybe yes, add my thoughts onto it, which is basically echoing thoughts of Sophia, which is to say that, see, hydrogen delivery, what large companies, steel companies, fertilizer companies, chemical companies, refineries, where there is concentrated use of hydrogen, will be the first to adopt hydrogen. And you will see fossil fuel elimination from there. But in transport sector, what you need is distribution. You need today in India, after gas being there for last 25 years, maybe only 4 to 6 cities in India effectively are CNG. How will you get hydrogen to Tushar's car? How will you get hydrogen to Sophia's car, Anmol's car? It is a game of distribution. Hydrogen on the generation side will be very easy to generate, large capex being put up. But even more large capex is required actually in the distribution of hydrogen to our homes, distribution of hydrogen to the common man, so that they can fuel up their cars or light up the gas stoves in their kitchens, which I believe the study says that for ₹1 or dollar spent in generation, you would need to spend $4 in distribution. So that's the kind of money which is required. And we have all seen it, like gas has been here for 25, 30 years, and still just 4, 6, 7, 8 cities in the country are actually having enough CNG network. Now on top of it, to lay down the entire pipelines for hydrogen is going to be a super tough task. So like ma'am mentioned, just echoing the same thoughts, that it's going to be in concentrated industries, but consumer will, and look at electricity. Almost every home in the country is now electrified. And you can charge, at least in the villages, in the Bharat area, which we call the rural India, every home has a 3-pin socket which is available, which can charge 2-wheelers, 3-wheelers, even 4-wheelers, but at a slower pace, but it can even charge 4-wheelers. So there is electricity distribution infrastructure which is already available through the nation. And hence, due to constraints around distribution of hydrogen, it will take, like what ma'am mentioned, a long time for hydrogen to become a mainstream fuel, because the distribution infra is so big to get created. Generation infra might get created, but distribution infra will be tougher than the generation infra.
Definitely. No, thank you so much. I think that's pretty well put by both you, Sophia and Anmol, and hopefully that tells the world out there that electric is the way to go for you, for your personal transportation and for your cab usage. So guys, that's where you should be looking at. I think we are almost close to all the time we had for this one webinar, but Anmol, I think before we end, and I see many questions there, and I believe that comes from all the consumer love that BLU-smart has always been getting. Anmol, when are you going to another city? Is there anything that you can share with the audience today?
Yeah, so I can only say this, that we are expanding into another city very soon. You will see us. Yeah, Sophia, that's true. So we're expanding to another city very soon. And you would see us in a very large city of the country in the next maybe less than 45 days. You will see us, you will see BLU-smart cars flying in a very important city of this country. It is the infra is already being built. Charging stations, which is the front end, or which is the back end of actually getting BLU-smart into any cities, is being built as we are speaking, and cars have been ordered for that city. The tech.
But can I also say,
sure,
they're also going to go deep as well, because I know there are a lot of people in Delhi NCR that don't have BLU-smart run in their corner. So trust me, there's going to be a lot of what I call depth. And I know a lot of BLU-smart folks are also on the call. So hi, everybody. I know you're working hard and making that happen. But it's two-prong attack. It's go wide, but go deep as well. Yes. I know we've had lots of conversation.
But I think
there's so much energy. Yeah.
Go deep will always win over go wide. But we just wanted to say that there is huge demand coming in from this very important city of the country, and we will in the next 45 days be surely present in city number 2. By the way, how I like to put it, Delhi NCR, is that we are present in 5 cities and 3 states. It is Uttar Pradesh, Haryana, and Delhi, and 5 cities of Gurgaon, Delhi, Faridabad, Ghaziabad, Noida. So we are already present in 3 states and 5 cities, but the big South Indian city is going to happen very soon.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Anmol. I think everyone's kind of watching us. There's enough and more to do, but definitely, guys, BLU-smart is here to help the cause of not just your transportation needs, but also hopefully the cause of how the nation kind of needs to move on mobility. Anmol, Sophia, thank you so much for your time on this webinar today. It was lovely talking to both of you. Thank you so much for sharing your insights, and audience, I believe and hope this was useful, and there'll be something to take away for each one of you from today's talk. Thank you so much, everyone, for your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Sophia ma'am. Thanks, Tushar. Thank you to the lovely audience that we had through the session. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.